My $12,000 custom ATV got stolen right out of my driveway by the 19-year-old daughter of our HOA president, and she did donuts in my yard while flipping me off like she owned the place. That's how the whole thing started, with gravel flying and a laugh that sounded like a challenge. I'm Garrett. I lost a leg in Afghanistan. That ATV was my independence, 8 months of hand-built controls, my ride to the VA, my small private freedom, and they treated it like a toy. People say, "What would you do?" Let me tell you, you don't stay calm when someone takes your lifeline and smirks while doing it. You either cry or you plan. I chose planning. Not out of spite at first, out of a kind of stubbornness that comes from having to relearn how to do everything after you lose a piece of yourself. I learned how to take apart engines the way I learned to take apart problems on patrol, methodically, patiently, until they won't work anymore. We'd moved to Willowbrook Estates because I wanted quiet, because the VA suggested rebuilding stuff with my hands would help therapy, they called it. So I built that ATV. 8 months, every bolt, like a stitch back into my life. The seat was molded around my prosthetic. I swear I could tell which nail had been hammered while I was thinking about my wife, or the smell of creosote in the desert at dawn. It was more than a machine. It was the sound of me getting myself back. Then Delilah Thornfield declared war. Picture the worst HOA stereotype: inherited wealth, real estate license, corner mansion, except she actually ran the place. People who can afford legal teams don't get notices, they hand them out. First week, a violation on my door: unauthorized vehicle storage bylaw 47C, $500 a day. I read the bylaw. It was meant for commercial fleets. My ATV, durable medical equipment, ADA protected. I showed up at the meeting with facts, with paperwork from the VA, with a calm voice. Delilah clicked her manicured nails like a metronome and said, "Do you know who I am? Mr. Steele, classic move. When you can't argue the facts, try to burn the messenger with rank." That's when Brooklyn walked in, 19 designer sneakers squeaking, already filming me like I was content. "Is this the weird military guy?" she asked, loud enough for everyone. Her tone craned my neck back, the kind of condescension that only privilege can teach. "Daddy says people like that fold when you apply the right pressure," she said, scrolling. The board voted to table my violation, a small win, but I watched the way they looked at me, the smirk that said they had options I didn't. A few nights later, they escalated. Midnight revs outside my garage, beer cans thrown at my yard tires, scribbling across the lawn. Security called it kids being kids. Delilah called it no violations. That laugh, Brooklyn's laugh, sounded like a diagnosis: untouchable. But untouchable is a bad plan when you don't know how to read paperwork, and I had time to read everything. I started digging. HOA financials are public if you know where to look. County records, meeting minutes, invoice trails. I found patterns: emergency repairs billed at outrageous prices, the same contractors popping up again and again, contracts over the threshold that never got bid out. Someone had built a system to siphon money, and the Thornfields were the hub. Once I saw the pattern, it stopped being personal and became tactical. This was organized, it was fixable. Then the things got uglier. Brooklyn cornered me at the mailbox one morning, perfume and arrogance, and said, "Be a shame if something happened to it." Threats moved from words to action. A week later, motorcycles roared through the subdivision, burnouts in front of my house. Frat boys yelling. One of them screamed, "Should have left both legs in Afghanistan, loser." You try not to let that lever something inside you, but it does. I recorded everything. Cameras, timestamps, witness notes. If they wanted war, they picked the wrong combat engineer. Here comes the twist. The unexpected ally you don't see coming. Meredith, a retired teacher with a backbone of oak and a kitchen full of chocolate chip cookies, had been keeping files. She'd watched them terrorize neighbors for years. Carlos, our pool guy, had invoices showing $800 pool filters sold for $40 wholesale. A neighborhood of quiet people, scared of lawyers and reputations, had a secret: they were furious, and they had receipts. Meredith had also been feeding an investigative reporter, Cassidy, who'd been sniffing at HOA fraud across the state. My stolen ATV turned out to be the missing human story Cassidy needed. We turned defense into offense. I installed night vision trail cameras, motion sensors, a military-grade GPS tracker hidden in the frame. You learn creative ways to adapt when you've lived off-grid for a while. Jake, my tech friend, rewired a kill switch that let me control the ATV remotely. We set traps with redundancy cameras in rafters, backup recorders, witnesses who couldn't be scared off anymore. We documented every contractor invoice, every emergency fix that lined Delilah's pockets. It became less about one machine and more about a pattern of theft. They only made themselves easier targets. Brooklyn, drunk on privilege, posted a video of herself doing donuts on my ATV at the country club, a live confession broadcast to thousands. "Thanks for the donation, soldier boy," she mocked while federal investigators watched in real time. She didn't learn discretion. She learned entitlement, which is loud and obvious and exactly what you don't want to do when federal agents are in the room. We played bait. I pretended to give up to sell the ATV, called her, and handed them the perfect story. She bit. She thought she'd proven her point. She thought she'd humiliated me. Instead, she walked into a federal net. On a Friday evening, surrounded by friends and flashing Instagram lives, she revved the engine, posed on my stolen machine like a coronation, and federal agents stepped out of the landscaping like choreography. I watched her face go from smug to shattered in a heartbeat as the app Jake built shut the engine down and agents closed in. When the handcuffs clicked, something inside the neighborhood unclenched like a held breath finally released. That sound, cuffs against metal, echoed more than a victory for me. It was a relief for retirees who'd eaten the Thornfield threats in silence, for the single mom whose complaint never went anywhere, for Carlos, who'd been overcharged for years. Federal indictments followed: wire fraud, RICO charges, money laundering, civil rights violations tied to disability harassment. The empire built on small-town influence and big-city greed started crumbling. The best part wasn't the sentences or the forfeited assets, though. Yes, they paid back more than they'd taken. It was the way the community changed. Emergency board elections swept out cronies, and folks who actually lived in Willowbrook took over. Carlos became HOA president and cut costs by demanding competitive bids. We used recovered funds to build a veterans memorial garden, accessible paths, and a workshop where disabled vets could learn adaptive engineering, taking the thing they'd tried to steal and turning it into a tool for healing. There's a lesson that isn't preachy because I learned it with cold beer on my tongue and camera lenses blinking. Power thrives in silence. Tyrants rely on neighbors being too tired, too scared, or too polite to look. But when you read the paperwork, when you put cameras where you can't be bribed, when you collect other people's stories, that's how systems fall. It's not always neat. It's not always legal elegant. It's patient like a sap rising. It's paperwork and midnight installs and cookies and tech friends who won't back down. You might think this says something grand about me, that I engineered a takedown single-handed, but it's smaller and better than that. It says ordinary people fed up and precise can outlast the loud and the rich. It says the law actually works when you give it evidence it can't ignore. And it says patience, planning, and allies matter more than rage. So what about Brooklyn? She did time. Her followers evaporated. She posted an apology written by lawyers and nobody believed it. Delilah lost her license, her contracts, her freedom. Willowbrook healed when we stopped letting money drown out the truth. The ATV came back as evidence then, as a symbol. A reminder that my independence was worth fighting for, and that the thing they tried to steal became the thing that helped rebuild a community. Here's what I want you to carry with you. Bullies don't always wear uniforms or carry signs. Sometimes they own the lawn care company, the enforcement contract, the judge's golf foursome. And when they think they're untouchable, that's when they're loudest and easiest to record. If you're sitting in a neighborhood with someone who seems to get away with everything, maybe look for the invoices, the minutes, the patterns. Ask for records. Talk to the quiet neighbor with the cookies. There's often a Meredith in your cul-de-sac keeping receipts. Now, a question that still nags me when the law finally shows up: is public humiliation part of justice, or is it cruelty dressed as consequence? I'd argue sometimes they're the same thing, because the people who wield power through humiliation deserve to feel small in public. But what do you think? Should accountability include public exposure, or should it be quiet behind closed doors? If you've ever been trampled by someone who thinks money buys them immunity, tell me. Drop your story below. Tell me how you pushed back or how you wish you had. Share this if it makes you think twice about the untouchable people in your life. Because at the end of the day, real power isn't in money or connections. It's in knowing the law, gathering the truth, and refusing to be quiet.